The Game of the Year award nominees are out, and we got a lot to talk about. GAMERViCE here. I'm Kevin, and I'm here with Hank. Hank, how's it going, man?
It's going good, baby. Good to be back. I know we took a little hiatus. My boy Kevin was enjoying some beautiful weather.
I was on vacation. I was in Cancun. You can barely tell because I don't hold tans that well. So
oh yeah, he already lost his tan. That's
I already lost. You can kind of see it a little bit here. But anyways, that's besides the point. Right now, we got to talk about these nominees for Game of the Year. They were just announced, I would say, probably a few days ago. What, like 2-3 days ago, maybe?
Yeah.
At the point of this recording. And there's some interesting nominations here. And there's some interesting games that got omitted from Game of the Year specifically. And that's what we're going to talk about today, specifically Game of the Year. Obviously, there are a bunch of other categories. I think in total, there's over 30 categories that you can vote for if you go to thegameawards.com. But as of this podcast episode, we're going to be talking about Game of the Year. Now,
the Game of the Year.
The 2023 Game of the Year. Now, before we start, we're going to talk about we're just going to list off the games that were nominated. So,
okay.
We have Alan Wake 2.
Yes.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes.
Spider-Man 2. Resident Evil 4. Super Mario Brothers Wonder. And The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, out of those 6, you know what? We're gonna leave our prediction for the end, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But out of those 6, is there any out of those that you're surprised that they're there? Because I have one that like sticks out like a sore thumb to me.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna let you have that one. I'm gonna go the Alan Wake 2 route here.
Okay. Okay. Talk to me. That's an interesting one.
You know what it is? I'm shocked because I don't feel like it is as much of a headline game as these other games. I could be crazy, but I say that because I'm around gaming news all the time. And for example, when we had more of a no-name come out of nowhere game last year get nominated in Deathloop, that was all over the headlines. So it's like I can understand it being there. I don't think we've seen a game horror survivalist style make it. And now I could be just talking out of my ass here, but I don't know if we've seen a game of this genre make it to the top. So I will say what that tells me is that's very telling that it must be pretty damn good. But I also want to know how good, because as much as I am around gaming news, I also have a lot of gaming friends and family. And out of these 6, I know somebody that's touched every game except this one. So like, that's what I mean. Like in this case, it's like, how great of a game is it? Like where I know a good amount of people that plays video games, like at least there's somebody who's played each of these games or is into these kind of games. And it's like Alan Wake 2, you just don't kind of fit in for me based off of the headlines these other games have gotten when they drop. And that's not to say anything, because it's just like, okay, it nominated. Now, if it were to win, I'd be shocked. So for all we know, it could come in 6th out of these voting. And it's like, okay, makes sense. See, it came in 6th.
Yeah.
So there's definitely other games I'm shocked didn't make it in, which we'll get into. But that's going to be my one game that shocks me that is there.
Yeah.
You,
okay,
Kevin?
So that makes sense. I'm going to say Resident Evil 4. And it's actually in part in the same reason, I think, as Alan Wake 2, which is these are games, first of all, they're survival horror games in different ways, but they're survival. So that niche, I feel like, is a niche in gaming communities that isn't necessarily the biggest, but it has a very strong following. So I'm also surprised in that sense. I'm surprised that Alan Wake 2 is there. But Resident Evil 4, not only that, but also it's a remake. And we talk about it a lot. Remakes, they have their purpose, but for me, for game of the year, I would rather see a game that is new, especially there's new IPs that we're going to get into that I feel like deserved nomination. Now, do I think nomination and winning the award are two different things? Yes. So there's games here that I can think of that should have been nominated other than Resident Evil 4. I still don't think that those games in particular would win, but I think that they deserve the spot more than Resident Evil 4. And that's not to say that this game isn't great, but it's just one of those things where it's like you had the blueprint years ago, because I think Resident Evil 4 came out in like 2006. Something crazy like that. So you had that blueprint, and obviously I understand that it's not a remaster. It's not just like an updated graphics thing, but it is a game that the concept of it and the characters of it and the general setting of it was already done for you, and you updated it for this year. So for me, Resident Evil 4, that should not have been here. That should not have been here. It's a great game. I've heard great things about it, but I just don't think for game of the year it should have been here.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that. Obviously, I already knew where you were heading with this. And if you guys have been part of the podcast and you've watched episodes, you already know how I feel about remakes and remasters. So I'm going to agree there. It's kind of crazy to me. You can make a game over that you already know is great and be put into this nomination. No one's saying it's not a great game. No one's saying it isn't amazing. Like all these things, right? But you shouldn't be allowed to be nominated because it's like you did this already. The same reason you're saying. And that's the only knock on it. It's not that it's not a great game, and it's not that it can't be like the game of the year for people that are playing. But for this nomination of winning an award, I don't think it's got business in there. So, and exactly, these two kind of have the same genre in mind that we actually happen to mention, which I didn't even think is like, oh, any survival horror games. And I wasn't thinking Resident Evils because I'm sure they've won Game of the Year in the past or something. They've been up for them. I was thinking more like super horror games that, like the flashlight games that people be playing. Like no real horror game like that ever gets nominated. But yeah, those two games here on GAMERViCE, we clearly don't agree with it. But that's the beauty of it. That's just us. You guys let us know what you think in the comments, or if we're crazy for thinking that about those two games. But now on to the other 4 games that were nominated, and that is one being Baldur's Gate 3, which Kevin, like I said, see, it's like Baldur's Gate 3. I personally haven't touched it.
Yeah.
But I know a couple friends and family that have played the game because of the headlines. And I've seen the headlines coming out like, oh my God, this is how you make a game. Oh my God, developers take notes. No microtransactions. Full game. Here you go. Now we'll, touch it up how we need to. Bug fixes. Oh, multiplayer. Great. Because I was starting to think, like, I was looking at this list. I saw 0 multiplayer, except for, thank God Baldur's Gate is here. That's another big thing to talk about. But Kevin, what are your thoughts? Baldur's Gate 3.
I mean, I'll leave my predictions for what game I think is going to be game of the year. But Baldur's Gate 3 is an amazing game. I mean, it's RPG, like you said, it has multiplayer aspect. It has one of the best character development storylines in an RPG that I can remember for a while now. And that goes, we're talking about the Elder Scrolls series. We're talking about the Final Fantasy series that I personally enjoy. I have a bias towards liking those types of games. Baldur's Gate 3, I think, takes the cake as far as story development and character dialogue. It does it so well. Whenever I play that game, I'm just surprised at how great the dialogue is between characters and stuff. So that game, to me, I'm not surprised that it's there. It just deserves to be nominated for Game of the Year, in my opinion. That game, to me, I would love to hear, if there's anybody out there, I would love to hear why you think it doesn't deserve to be there. Because I want to, not to say that I'm going to have conversations and like debate it, but I just like to hear the opinion of why you think it may not need to be part of this list. Um, moving on, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Now, I'm going to preface this. We might actually disagree on this point, but I would say that Spider-Man 2, it would be my second game. If Resident Evil 4 is my first game that I'm surprised is on this list, I'm kind of surprised Spider-Man 2 is on this list.
Okay.
And it's not because it's not a great game.
You're starting to make me think about it as I see it up there. I kind of just read over it and wasn't like really thinking deep into Spider-Man 2. But yeah, go ahead.
It's not because it's not a great game. But again, it's one of those things where it's like you had the original Spider-Man and then you had the Miles Morales game. And now you have the Spider-Man 2 game. And I'm not saying that the story isn't different. I'm not saying that the graphics haven't been updated. But I do feel watching the game and reading some of the reviews that it's a lot of the same.
Yeah, and the argument here is that technically it's the same world and they maybe expand on New York by adding parts of New York. But literally, it's technically still the same map because they're not changing. Like, that's the Spider-Man world and he's in New York and he's there.
Setting. Yeah.
So that's the setting. And it's one of those things, again, not that it can't be a great game, but it's like if you're going to give it an award, you know now this isn't the first time this has been done type of deal. But I guess then maybe that's where we have to draw, like, Game of the Year doesn't have to do anything with that. It's literally just for the best game. But I have a hard time even thinking that this is the best game of the year because part of being the best is also feeling like it's something you've never done before or, experienced before.
Yeah.
And that's been the case in previous years. If we kind of go, I guess, if we're looking back here, Elden Ring last year was our winner. And that was like, oh my God. You have people that never played that style game playing that game. Like Elden Ring brought out, I don't know how many copies it ended up selling. That game got played by so many. It Takes Two won in 2021. That's a great switch up on Game of the Year, and that goes to show like whatever co-op adventure they must have gave was such a new fresh take and puzzle thinking game for two people to play must have been great. The Last of Us Part 2 won, but it didn't win before that. I don't believe so. Because I'm looking up to 2024 and it never won. So then you got Sekiro, right? Am I saying that? Sekiro or is it Sekiro? I don't even know how to say it.
I think you said it right.
And God of War, Breath of the Wild, Overwatch, Witcher 3, Dragon Age Inquisition. Pretty interesting. Okay, like there's a lot of variety. None of those games play exactly the same, And it's like, I guess this is the thing. I don't even know. I kind of lost myself because we were talking about Spider-Man and I was just like, it doesn't deserve to be there, but it does. I don't know. Spider-Man's a weird one for me. I can't wait to touch it. I'll probably play it come the holiday season. I'm just going to wait because I was in no rush to play it. Yeah. But I also was in no rush to play it because exactly like you said, the only thing I'm really expecting is a new story. And yeah, you're going to change up some game, but how much can you change up gameplay mechanics wise for Spider-Man? Like he's got a web sling and he's got to have his main web attacks. Now, you add some new little things, but you can only add so much, you know what I mean? Other than the story. So if you're telling me it's getting Game of the Year for nomination for the story, then it better have a crazy story. And it makes me now, while Kevin talks, makes me want to look up the best story if this is even a nomination. Because if not, what the hell is it doing there?
Yeah. So we've pretty much covered 4 games, or we've touched on 4 games. So the 5th one I want to speak on is the Super Mario Wonder game. I've watched somebody stream this game pretty consistently. It looks like a really fun game. I'm not too surprised that a Super Mario game is here. I guess it is a little interesting because it's a side-scrolling game. It's unique, I guess. But Game of the Year, man, it's tough. It's tough because you really want to, and you guys, it's like having nostalgia for the Mario franchise. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why it could be seen as a Game of the Year, because you also add that nostalgia into it. Like I said, I've seen somebody stream this game, so it looks really good. But personally, as I've watched somebody play this game, I also wouldn't think that it beats there's at least two other games on this list that I feel like would beat it, should beat it, I should say. But that, that's just me.
Yeah. Which game was that? Super Mario Brothers. Definitely a good one there. I was looking now to confirm under Best Narrative, and Spider-Man 2 is there. So we shall see what happens. So maybe it does win, and that's definitely that is why I want to play the game. I love the single player stories in games. So that's not even to take away from it. So you know what? Maybe I'll change my mind after I play. Maybe it should be up there. All right. And maybe I'm letting Kevin sway me right now. So you know what, Kevin? Screw you. Spider-Man should be up there. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay.
Listen. All right. We're gonna talk about it. Once we cover Tears of the Kingdom, we're gonna talk about the games that we think were snubbed for nominations. And then once you add those, I'm going to hypothetically ask you, if all those other games are in there, would you still think Spider-Man 2 should be in there? So you get ready for that question.
All right.
Tears of the Kingdom, I'm not surprised at all that it's on this list.
Yeah.
It should be in this list. Like I said, this is one of the most hyped games of the year, most anticipated games of the year. It released. It delivered on being one of the most anticipated games of the year. It's one of those things where I've watched a couple people play this game, and they had nothing but great, amazing things to say, from the story to the gameplay to the music and the score of the game. That's
now to play devil's advocate here, man, because we're gonna fight, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually not against Zelda, by the way, people. I'm just trying to get, because now we was just talking all that shit, right? These last couple games, but now what do we say? It's like
you're absolutely
The Legend
right.
of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild actually already won. Wasn't there a blueprint there? But the argument here is that that's how great of a game this must be, because to my knowledge, it's not just straight up the same game. They added so many different gameplay mechanics to this game, and it's new puzzles in it. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily the same map. So that's why I feel like it can debunk that argument. I kind of just wanted to bring up the argument to be devil's advocate, but it's like, you're
100% right.
Yeah, the game has been out, but like
technically, if we were just being like straight, unbiased, and just following what we have been saying, if Spider-Man 2 doesn't deserve to be on here and Resident Evil doesn't deserve to be on here, technically Tears of the Kingdom shouldn't be on here too, because I'm not mistaken, it's still in the same world. They just added elements to it, like they had like the whole sky element to it, which kind of in the same concept of what they did with Spider-Man 2. So technically, I mean, we're being hypocrites right now. I hate being a hypocrite.
We're going back and forth, man. But this is why gaming discussion is crazy. But it also is what brings us to our next thing, where it's like, where we feel like, you know what? Realistically, when we look at all this, outside of Baldur's Gate and maybe Super Mario Bros., who's been so long and they've kind of redid their, like, we haven't had a 2D the platformer like that of Mario in a long time. Yeah, it's like, then you start thinking about those four of the games. It's like, we've seen something like it at least then, right? Whereas where I feel now, these games that got slighted, at least two of them, I think they should have been in there because there's like a fresh take on something in my eyes. But exactly, this is why this is all opinions. And this is why, like anything they tell you out there, when it's an award or for something and you can vote, you got to go vote. So your opinion matters. Go vote, right? Go vote.
Yeah.
So it's like, go vote, because
I will say just to, I guess, play more devil's advocate, Alan Wake 2 isn't necessarily a game that I've seen before. It's just, I'm surprised that it's on this list because it doesn't necessarily, to me, hit the mainstream, or it was as mainstream as the rest of them, didn't hit as many headlines as the rest of them, as great as a game as it was. I'm not necessarily saying that it's, not a great game or
yeah, exactly. All these games are clearly great. Yeah. They're all clearly great. That's why they're in the discussion. So that's always one of those things too, when people forget, when they start arguing about best, they're like arguing, I'm going to use a real crazy debate here and we're going to drop it, but like a LeBron and Michael Jordan debate. it's like you're arguing, and the only thing the other person hears when you don't listen to their side is like, so you think he's really that bad? It's like, no. We're really just talking about who's the actual best. So therefore, if they're not the best, they're like right there, number 2. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's arguing almost nothing.
You know what it is? I think a lot of people do, like, in their head when you debate or argue something like this, people rank them, right? Like, if you say Alan Wake 2 is better than, Resident Evil 4, for instance, they say, oh, so you think Alan Wake 2 is number 1 and Resident Evil is number 2 or further down, when it's really like, no, Alan Wake 2 is an A+ game and Resident Evil 4 is also A+ game, but you just think Alan Wake 2 is better. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it should be like a tier list, not necessarily like a ranking, and you put them down, you push them down the list.
Absolutely.
But there were a few games that came out this year that I think we can both agree, at the very least, should have been nominated for Game of the Year.
Yes.
And I'm going to start with Hogwarts Legacy, the Harry Potter game. Now, okay. I know why. The biggest reason I can think of, assumption, obviously, because nobody, I don't think anybody, especially a critic who has a say as to who should be nominated, I don't think any of them would ever come out and just say this, but I'm pretty sure, assumptions, I'm pretty sure the reason why it's not on this list is because of all the controversy with J.K. Rowling. My issue, and I know this is kind of broadening this topic a little bit, is Hogwarts Legacy didn't even get nominated for anything.
That's wild. It's wild.
That's crazy to me.
It is kind of wild. I'm not gonna lie, that's wild.
And that game was amazing. Here's a new IP, or at least I would say it's a new IP.
That's a new IP, bruh. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there have been, because I say that because I know that there have been Harry Potter games in the past, but here's a new IP, and they did such an amazing job on this game. I mean,
they brought a world to life that people have died for as fans, that they've wanted to have immersion with that world, and they brought it to life.
And my problem with this was that I understand that there may be controversy with the author that wrote the books, but she had nothing to do with the development of the game. Like, I understand you're using her world, but these developers brought it to life.
Yeah.
So by not nominating this game for anything, I kind of feel like you also snub the people who worked on it.
Yeah.
And that's wild to me.
Yeah, no, that's a rough one, but I 100% agree in the sense that, like, I don't know how Hogwarts didn't make it. And it's the recency bias, which is always a thing for me too when it comes to this Game of the Year crap, bro. Because what is the oldest game on here? If we're being honest, what is the oldest game on here?
I mean, technically, that remake would be the oldest. But
yeah, the remake. But what is it? Zelda?
I don't even. It's Zelda.
June. It's Zelda. And when was that? May?
Zelda was in June, April or May, I think.
Was it? Okay, so never mind. I thought if it was like end of May or June, then it would have been crazy.
It was in May.
Yeah, like you got Hogwarts, man. February, that thing came out as a banger. It's like recency bias, because then outside of Zelda, man, everything is still, I feel like, end of the summer on. Like, that's insane. It's all what we know now. That's how it's one of those things too that is so hard not to let happen. As people with opinions, whoever makes these nominations and give like the nominations up, like, I understand it, but I just feel bad for Hogwarts Legacy. And exactly, it's like, it's just one of those things now, I guess, where like you're kind of tied to somebody, and now because people don't mess with them, it's like, yeah, now you clearly now have to suffer for that. But at the same time, this same Hogwarts Legacy is the one though that people were at least trying to fight for, like, that nonsense against that, and it broke records when it came to streaming and things like that, live streaming and concurrent viewers. So people clearly wanted to support the game, not the other stuff. But because exactly, they're two separate. You got to be able to remove the two, man. You got to be able to remove the two. Now, yet I can understand if you're someone who has a problem with the author and you didn't want to buy the game because, apparently whatever in the contract, she might be getting like 1% of this, like whatever she's getting royalties for the game. So understand. I completely agree. Like, fine, go do that. But exactly when we're talking about, again, for what the game is, she didn't make the game. She don't know how to code. She ain't the developer. It was her work. They needed to use her books and not, but like,
But
that's
even
not her
still,
game.
man,
Like at the end of the day, that's not her game.
yeah.
That's an
Even-
original story. That's not her game. Like, so it just, you hate to see, you know, a group of developers that did a great job get wrapped up into something like that, where maybe they fell short of it, or maybe we're just crazy and apparently it wasn't a nomination. But I strongly believe it was. Moving on, this one is, instead of the recency bias issue, it's the hype issue. And I think we saw this, if you ask me, with Cyberpunk. Did Cyberpunk mess the whole thing? Cyberpunk, what really happened with Cyberpunk is the old gen really screwed it up. They should have never tried to make that for PS4, Xbox 360. And maybe they could have waited for consoles if they knew the new gen consoles, if they knew they were going to do that. But again, this is where, let's talk about the game I'm talking about. It's Starfield. I think hype messes this game up because what did Starfield and Cyberpunk have? Hype. Super aggressive advertising everywhere. So much money spent in advertisement, all that. So it's all you see. And while all that is happening, the only thing that is happening is giving people the most ridiculous high expectations. Because put it this way, I can guarantee you, if there was a meter or way to put a device on somebody, an expectations meter, if you take Starfield and Cyberpunk, I guarantee you the expectations going into the game were higher than any of those 6 games right now that are nominated for expectations. And you can say what you want, but like expectations now, if you have them and you play, that's going to sour the taste of the game for you. And I feel like that's definitely what happened with Starfield and the hate with the Microsoft thing and all that. But like, as far as Starfield, again, making a sandbox out in space and like this whole thing, new, fresh kind of experience, like gameplay mechanic, like, ooh, it plays like a Bethesda game. Yes, we know that, but like, there's no other Starfield out there. No other game plays like that. Yeah. And it is a damn good game. And it should have been nominated.
Now I'm gonna send you this picture because I understand that there are outlets that don't necessarily agree with the both of us that are saying that Starfield should be on this list. However, you can clearly see, and I'll put this up on the screen, that there are plenty of outlets that do.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's a new IP, and I feel like a new IP, a group of developers who are trying something new and succeeding. And in my opinion, they succeeded. I know that there's some things. I know that Todd Howard, maybe he, over embellished on what the game could do as far as the exploration of the
some of that stuff,
the planets and some of the stuff. But as a whole, I believe that they hit their mark on what they were trying to do, and they succeeded. And there's a clear following, a clear community of people that think this game is an amazing game. I heard people even joking around saying, well, yeah, it's not game of the year because it's game of the generation. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't know, I know that, again, that's like over exaggerating, but that's just to say this game is amazing. I think it should have been on the list. I think it should have bumped off Resident Evil 4, I guess. But anyways, the last game that I want to talk about really quick is Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16 is another game. It's another one of these things where it's like, I don't know if it's because in people's minds who haven't never played a Final Fantasy game, they just think Final Fantasy 16 is like a sequel to the other 15 games in the
I was going to say, it is Final Fantasy 16, so now maybe that didn't help
not how it works.
It didn't help its case.
Yeah, I don't know why Square Enix ever did this, or Squaresoft back in the day, but these are actually new characters. It's a whole new setting, a whole new world, a whole new story. This is one of those games where it's interesting because I know that we don't like looking at Metacritic scores. I know that we don't like looking at scores in particular of one, site or whatever. But just to kind of put a little thought, food for thought, IGN, which is one of the biggest websites, They scored Spider-Man 2 an 8 out of 10, and it's on this list. They scored Final Fantasy 16 a 9 out of 10. It's actually a better scored game on one of the biggest published critic websites or whatever you want to call it, and yet it's not on this list. And then on top of that, if you go through any Reddit post or Twitter or whatever, and you ask, the questions ask what game should have been on this list, I think that you'll see Final Fantasy 16 is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest. When I looked on one particular, obviously it's anecdotal, but on one particular Twitter post, Final Fantasy 16 was the number one by a mile, the number one game that people were saying that should have been on this list. So it's just to say, I guess that's just to say also this year has had so many great games.
Yeah.
Obviously
turned out to be a good one.
Obviously there's only 6 nominees. You can't nominate all the games, but I think it's another game that should have been on this list. Go ahead.
No, and I was going to say then, with that being said, and obviously if at any moment in this video you wanted to, put your comments or let's talk about what you thought, I have a question for you guys, though. Then forget about, we got the 6 games right here. Kevin kind of just mentioned it. I'm curious what everyone's next game in as a nominee would have been. So if there were 7 nominees, what game would you put in there? Clearly, we see Kevin would have put in Final Fantasy 16. Me, I probably would have put in Hogwarts Legacy. So let us know what you would have put in as the 7th. And if not, let us just know your 6 nominees for what you think it should be. Let us know we're crazy for what we said about some of the games if we're completely out of line, out of pocket. But that's all I got to say about this game of the year. Very interesting. And it is almost here. When do we? When is this?
December 7th is when the awards happen. So
December 7th.
So we've got less than a month. Then. Yep. All right. So that being said, it's time to make our predictions. Name the game that you think is going to be game of the year. If it's different. So for me, I have a game that I want to win game of the year, and then I have a game that I think is actually going to win the game of the year. Does that make sense?
I'll do the same.
Okay. So I think. Go ahead. You start.
Right, go ahead. It might be the same. All right.
I don't know.
Ready? How about this? On the count of 3, we say the game that we think is going to win.
Think it's going to win. Okay.
Okay. Ready?
All right.
1, 2, 3. Baldur's Gate.
Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, you're late as hell. All right. No, that's good. All right. So Baldur's Gate, I think is going to win. I think it's had too much hype. That is not my which one I hope wins. You know what? I think that Baldur's Gate is what I think is going to win. So, Kevin, you said Tears of the Kingdom. I don't really have one that I hope wins because I kind of hope, like, it would be nice for Baldur's Gate 3 developer. But what I not even hope wins, I also kind of just think we'll be shocked by exactly. It's going to be like a Super Mario or Legends of Zelda because those Nintendo folks are crazy, man. We forget. They don't play around. But, Kevin, who do you hope wins?
I hope Baldur's Gate 3 wins.
Exactly. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Baldur's Gate 3, we're pushing for, just because that one, out of all of these, well, I guess, who makes Alan Wake 2?
Remedy. They're the developers who made Control and Quantum Break. So they're good.
They're like mid to top tier, developer wise. So, and then we know the other 4 are top of the list, triple A. So it would be pretty cool once again, man, for a developer like Baldur's Gate's team out there to bring home the hardware. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is today's episode. And you know where you're at. GAMERViCE, giving you all the vice you need. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Like the video, share the video, drop a comment, talk your ish. Kevin, we are out.
Out.